Welcome back to our channel. Today we're diving deep into the complex world of international trade, focusing on a crucial development between South Korea, the United States, and Canada. As the Trump administration continues to impose tariffs on key trading partners, one country is feeling the heat more than most: South Korea. But how will South Korea navigate this turbulent trade climate? Can Canada step in as an alternative trade partner? And what's at stake in this high-stakes game of global commerce? Stick with us to find out. South Korea's dependence on exports. Let's start by understanding why South Korea is so vulnerable to U.S. tariffs. South Korea is a powerhouse in global trade. With a population of over 50 million, the country is known for its high-tech exports. Automotive giants like Hyundai, and consumer electronics from Samsung, LG, and more. These industries, especially steel and electronics, rely heavily on the U.S. market, which accounts for a significant portion of South Korea's foreign trade. In fact, roughly 20% of South Korea's total exports go to the United States. That means anything that disrupts access to this massive market, especially in the automotive or steel sectors, could have a profound impact on the country's economy. But why are these exports so important to the U.S.? U.S. dependence on South Korean imports. The relationship is mutually beneficial. The U.S. needs South Korea's technological products, like advanced electronics and telecommunications equipment. Likewise, South Korea relies on the U.S. for agricultural products, energy resources, and even military support. The U.S.-Korea Free Trade Agreement, Chorus FTA, signed in 2012, was meant to strengthen this economic bond. But the Trump administration's approach to tariffs has thrown a wrench into that agreement, bringing us to the current situation. The Trump tariff strategy. The Trump administration's America First policy has led to a dramatic shift in global trade relations. The U.S. has imposed tariffs on steel and aluminum imports from several countries, including South Korea. These tariffs were initially part of a broader push to reduce the U.S. trade deficit and protect American industries from what it sees as unfair foreign competition. But how fair are these tariffs to South Korea? The country's steel industry, in particular, has been targeted by the U.S., accusing South Korean manufacturers of dumping cheap steel into the U.S. market, which undercuts local prices. For South Korea, this has been a major issue. In 2018, the U.S. imposed a 25% tariff on steel imports, and South Korea was one of the countries affected. Diplomatic tension and economic strain. This move has created diplomatic tension. South Korea had hoped that the Chorus FTA would protect them from these sorts of measures, but that hasn't been the case. As a result, the South Korean government is facing mounting pressure from industries and its citizens to secure tariff exemptions or face significant losses. South Korea's trade minister recently visited Washington, D.C., hoping to negotiate a favorable outcome. These negotiations are critical. If tariffs remain in place, the damage to South Korea's economy could be severe, especially considering how much the country depends on exports to the U.S. Major South Korean companies like Hyundai and Samsung have already started looking for ways to mitigate these costs. But can they succeed? The growing tension between South Korea and the U.S. One of the driving factors behind the tariff dispute is the U.S. trade deficit with South Korea. Despite the Chorus FTA, which was designed to balance trade, the U.S. continues to import more from South Korea than it exports. This trade imbalance has become a sore point for President Trump, who believes that reducing trade deficits is key to revitalizing the American economy. In addition to steel, the automotive sector has become another target. South Korea's automotive exports to the U.S., including brands like Hyundai, Kia, and Genesis, face heavy scrutiny. Trump has made it clear that he expects countries like South Korea to reduce trade imbalances in return for preferential treatment in trade agreements. The role of Canadian trade now? Let's talk about Canada and why it's becoming an increasingly important partner for South Korea. In response to the pressure from the U.S., South Korea has been looking to diversify its trade relationships, and Canada offers a potential lifeline. Why Canada, you ask? Well, Canada is rich in resources like oil and natural gas, and it has a relatively open trade policy. South Korea has started increasing its trade in energy and steel, with Canada as a way to hedge against the risk of U.S. tariffs. If South Korea can strengthen its relationship with Canada, it may be able to bypass some of the difficulties it faces with the U.S., particularly in energy trade. Canada's strategic economic position. Canada's growing role in South Korea's trade strategy can be attributed to several factors. First, Canada is a major producer of oil, and South Korea is looking to diversify its energy imports. In 2019, Canada was the fourth largest supplier of oil to South Korea, which signals the growing importance of this trade relationship. But it's not just about energy. Canada also provides key industrial goods, including steel, which has become a crucial commodity for South Korea in the face of U.S. tariffs. By diversifying its trade with Canada, South Korea can reduce its dependency on the U.S. market, which may help to stabilize its economy amid growing trade tensions. How South Korea and Canada are strengthening ties. In recent years, both countries have been making strides to deepen their trade ties. The Canada-South Korea Free Trade Agreement, CKFTA, which came into force in 2015, has made it easier for both nations to exchange goods and services. Under this agreement, tariffs have been reduced or eliminated on many key sectors, making Canada an even more attractive trading partner for South Korea. For example, South Korea is now importing more Canadian agricultural products like wheat, beef, and pork, while Canada is benefiting from South Korea's advanced technology and consumer electronics. This growing trade relationship provides a stable foundation for South Korea to pivot away from the U.S. in areas where it faces tariff challenges. U.S. strategic leverage, military and economic influence. It's important to understand the U.S.'s strategic position in all of this. The Trump administration has made it clear that South Korea benefits significantly from the U.S. military presence in the region, especially with North Korea's ongoing provocations. For the U.S., South Korea's defense cooperation is a key part of the trade equation. In fact, President Trump has argued that the U.S. should be able to use this leverage to secure better trade deals. The U.S. sees the military partnership as a bargaining chip, and some argue that South Korea should make further concessions on trade to account for this military support. This dynamic has added a layer of complexity to the negotiations between South Korea and the U.S., where security and trade intersect. South Korea's negotiation tactics. Offering concessions. In response to the tariffs and the pressure from the U.S., South Korea is negotiating hard. The country has offered several concessions in exchange for tariff exemptions, particularly in the agricultural and energy sectors. For example, South Korea has proposed to increase its imports of U.S. energy products, like natural gas and coal, and to provide more access to U.S. farmers by purchasing more agricultural goods. Furthermore, South Korea has hinted at joint ventures in the automotive sector, aiming to give U.S. companies a bigger share of the South Korean market. These proposals are designed to show the U.S. that South Korea is willing to meet American demands in some areas, but it's clear that the tariff exemption is their top priority. The domestic pressure on South Korea. But it's not just about international diplomacy. There's also significant domestic pressure on the South Korean government to secure tariff exemptions. Trade with the U.S. is vital for South Korea's industries, and any increase in tariffs could result in job losses and economic disruption. South Korean citizens and politicians are worried about what will happen if the tariff exemptions aren't granted. The country's economy is heavily intertwined with its exports, and sectors like steel, automotive, and consumer electronics contribute significantly to GDP and employment. A collapse in trade could hit not just corporations but everyday workers, creating political instability. Canada's role in diversifying trade routes. Canada has positioned itself as a strategic partner in this delicate balance. If South Korea can lean on its Canadian relationship more heavily, it could bypass some of the tariffs imposed by the U.S. And Canada, for its part, benefits from this partnership by securing access to the advanced technologies that South Korea is known for. With steel and energy trade growing between the two countries, this relationship could shift the power dynamics in North America, especially in a world where trade barriers are becoming more common. As both South Korea and Canada diversify their trade routes, they may find new opportunities for collaboration. Yes, Spaz, the future of global trade. What does it mean for South Korea and Canada? As global trade tensions continue to rise, South Korea and Canada are positioning themselves as key players in the changing landscape. For South Korea, the strategy is clear. Diversify its trading partners, strengthen relationships with countries like Canada, and reduce dependency on the US. For Canada, the benefits are obvious. By deepening trade ties with South Korea, Canada is positioning itself as a middle player between the US and the rest of the world. With both countries looking to diversify and protect their economies, it's possible that the future of North American trade could be more multipolar, with Canada playing a larger role. Conclusion: the future of South Korea and Canada's trade relationship. The future of South Korea and Canada's trade relationship looks promising. While the US-South Korea trade dispute is far from over, both countries are finding ways to adapt to the changing global trade landscape. Canada's resource wealth and trade policies provide a unique opportunity for South Korea to diversify its options and lessen its reliance on the US. In the coming years, we will see how this complex web of trade policies will evolve. Whether or not South Korea gets its tariff exemptions from the US, one thing is certain: global trade is changing, and countries like South Korea, Canada, and the US will need to find new ways to work together and navigate these turbulent waters. And that's a wrap for today's video. The US-South Korea trade tensions are just one example of how shifting international policies are reshaping the global economy. What do you think about this trade dynamic between South Korea, the US, and Canada? Do you believe Canada will play a bigger role in the future? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed this deep dive into global trade, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon so you never miss an update on international economics. We've got more insightful content coming your way. Thanks for watching.